As Kingfishers Catch Fire by Gerard Manley Hopkins is one of my favorite poems. Um, it's exquisite in its structure. As I've chatted with other people about this, I'm not entirely sure whether it's not a very accessible poem, I'll grant that. It is, squeezing the meaning out of it is frankly more work than many people are prepared to do. But if you're a word nerd or a poet, many folk consider it a masterpiece. I know I do. And it's a piece that I refer to when I'm trying to get mastery of my own craft. It is so, the attention to detail, the amount of strenuous work that's gone into it is, when you deconstruct it, really clear. A bit about Gerard Manley. He was a poet who recommitted himself to God in his early 20s and destroyed all of his poetry at that time, which is a terrible shame. But obviously had a tremendous gift for understanding sound. And Gerard Manley Hopkins, though not broadly known, is certainly incredibly influential. So Ezra Pound, Yeats, Auden, pretty much every poet of the 20th century that's really studied the craft deeply owes a debt of some kind to Gerard Manley Hopkins. The Kingfisher piece is really difficult to recite. There's a brilliant reading of it on YouTube by the channel is called Spoken Verse, and I really recommend this channel to people because there are something like over 1,000 poems read by an anonymous but really gifted poet who does a very neutral reading, and deliberately. There are a number of ways of injecting or extracting meaning from a recitation of the Kingfisher poem, but he's gone for a very neutral reading of it, which is correct for his channel. I find, with the exception of the spoken verse, that most people's reading of the Kingfisher poem is insipid. It's very much up here. Yes, there's a lot of imagery in here that is religiously driven and very clever. I mean, Kingfisher, Jesus. This is a thesis of sorts. It's a traditional sonnet. There's 14 lines. It has follows almost like a poetic essay. It starts out with an opening statement. It then takes it to the next step where it infers something, and then finishes off with the argument. And the argument is, in this case, that since small things mirror large things, so nature must mirror heaven, so man must mirror God, and therefore, says Gerard Manley Hopkins, God must exist, QED. A very Jesuitical argument, and not surprisingly, Gerard Manley Hopkins was a very, very devout Anglican, and was not unaware of Jesuitical arguments. So a kingfisher, Christ was a fisher of men. The kingfisher, the fisher king, is Jesus. It's all very clever, and so a lot of the recitations focus on the cleverness of the aptness of the words that were chosen, what Ezra Pound calls the logopoeia, ignoring the deeper beauty, many of the deeper beauties of it, which is, again, to borrow from Ezra Pound, the melopoeia, the joy, the lusciousness of the sounds. And in its opening statement, as kingfishers catch fire, so dragonflies draw flame, there is also a sound argument that's being made. As as kingfishers catch fire, dráw, fl. As a small sound is, so a large sound is. Very, very clever. So then if you don't really get that, I think a lot of the rest of the poem, falls on deaf ears. Ha ha ha. So as tumbled over rim and roundy wells, stones ring. In other words, when you throw a stone into a well, not only does it make that tick 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 sound as it hits the sides, but there's a reverberation. And so he's saying that God is a reverberation as well. And there were reverberations in the telling of this particular, if you will, story. And Again, a huge kudos to spoken verse here, which is deliberately done in a neutral tone. Most readers or poets who try and read this just miss it for me, and miss a lot of the beauty of it. The other thing that's again, not most people are not prepared to do the work for this, and who can blame them, right? I'm just geeking out myself, showing why I occasionally love this piece. There are occasions where I don't love it. Sometimes I just think it's too damn clever for its own good, and it doesn't actually speak to the heart of the matter. But it doesn't stop me from studying it and admiring it greatly. The other thing is that although this does follow a sonnet, and pretty close to, as Kingfishers, an iambic sort of sonnet, it's not truly iambic. One of the things that ticks me off when people parsing out poetry is they say that it's an iamb is like a tick-tock. It's a da-da. It's a way of breaking down poems. So, shall I compare thee to summer's day? They say that that's iambic pentameter, 5 sets of tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. Yeah, but that's bullshit. It's not how the poem was written. It's not how it's supposed to be read. It's not a simple tick-tock. The English language doesn't work like that. We have some of our ticks are longer than our tocks, right? It's da-da-da, da-da-da-da. So this idea of compression and release is really explored deeply in Manley's work, what one of his admirers called sprung rhythm. And really it's just a way to explain the way that you can accumulate tension in one line which needs to be released in another. And that's because English language doesn't have set syllables, like, say, Japanese, where each syllable is exactly the same unit. You owe a debt which has to be paid off in the next line. It's a lot like improvised jazz in that respect. You just need to fill in the blanks there. Anyhow, the other thing that strikes me about this poem is that a lot of people try and make it a sonnet, and finish each line, making it finish each thought. But that's not how this is written. This could easily be written as just a series of statements with a high degree of lyrical content. And I think the poem makes more sense if you acknowledge that it's a sonnet, but aren't enslaved to the line endings, to how you push it out there. If you've got a copy of it handy, this will make sense. But so I'll have a go at it, and this is my interpretation of it based on... there's another thing I want to throw in here too, is there's a tension and release also in Gerard Manley Hopkins. A lot is made of the fact that he quite possibly was gay. Whether he expressed it or not, I don't know. There certainly is a lot of tension in his language about his love of human form, but his inability to touch it. And so there's that tension and release is evident in his use of language. You read his Harry Plowman, and it's like it's quite the love poem to the male form. I think that the fact that he leaves the male form idea to the end of this piece is a kind of a bit of rationalization for him. He's talking about, okay, we've got kingfishers over here, we've got this in nature, and I like looking at hot guys, which is why God must exist. I'm paraphrasing. I don't know. It just has it's building an argument for God, but it also appears to be building an argument for Gerard Manley's appreciation of the male form, and resolving his tension around that more seriously. So, as kingfishers catch fire, dragonflies draw flame. As tumbled of a rim in roundy wells, stones ring. Like each tucked string tells, each hung bell's bow swung finds tongue to fling out broad its name. Each mortal thing does one thing and the same. Deals out that being indoors each one dwells. Selves, because it's self. Myself, it speaks and spells, crying, what I do is me, for that I came. I say more. The just man's justices keeps grace that keeps all his goings graces. Acts in God's eye, what in God's eye he is, Christ. For Christ plays in 10,000 places, lovely in limbs and lovely in eyes not his, to the Father through the features of men's faces. Thanks for listening.